Imagine an afterlife so exacting that only the lightest hearts could cross. Not a number, not a tally, but a truth whispered in samples, that the road was narrow and the gates opened only to those who lived in balance. Tonight, we're following that road, step by step, from the moment the body was prepared, through the prayers, the confessions, the weighing of the heart, all the way to the green fields of paradise. If you've walked with us before through Egypt's season and survival, tonight we go deeper still. Our most detailed look yet a judgment at the Duat. If you're here just to learn something new, you'll see how every daily choice, every kindness, every truth spoken was part of surviving this cosmic test. And if you've never been here before, don't worry. You don't need a map. Just follow a lantern through the gates, and the road will unfold. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll know the whole path, how the body, the name, the heart, and even the stars themselves all had to align. This is the story of why only the lightest of the light could pass, why only 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100, 1 in 10, or perhaps only 0.1% reached eternity. The Egyptians imagined death not as an end, but as a departure. To them, night itself was a kind of rehearsal, the sun slipping below the horizon, drifting through unseen waters, only to rise again in the east. They believed that the soul, too, would set forth on such a passage. It was not a simple stroll into shadow, but a voyage through a land beneath the land, a place they called the Duat. The Duat was vast, and its map was unlike any you might unroll on papyrus. It was a river that ran through darkness, winding past caverns and gates, watched by guardians with eyes that never closed. It was marked with fairies that would not row for just anyone, with doorways that would not open without the right name. Some called it a labyrinth, some a night sea, but all agreed it was not forgiving. And yet, it was not chaos. The duat had its order, its stations, its royals. The Egyptians pictured it as processions of hours, 12 in all, echoing the hours of night. In each, the traveler would meet new beings, face new challenges, answer new questions. To make it through, one needed more than courage. One needed knowledge, memory, preparation. At its heart stood three powers who defined the journey. Osiris, the green-faced lord of the dead, who once was a king upon the earth, but now ruled the halls beyond it. Anubis, the jackal-headed guide, protector of tombs and guardians of embalmers, whose nose could sniff out falsehood as easily as decay. And above them both, invisible but unyielding, Ma'at, the truth, balance, and the feather against which every heart would be weighed. Together, they shaped the traveler's path, Osiris receiving, Anubis leading, Ma'at judging. The duat was not a place you wandered by chance. It had to be entered correctly. Priests chanted spells as the body was laid to rest, words that acted like keys, unlocking the gates ahead. Without them, the soul would stumble in darkness, unable to answer the guardians who demanded their names. The Egyptians imagined whole companies of these beings, serpent-headed, lion-faced, winged or shadowy, each bearing the way until they heard the right word. This was not cruelty, it was order. Only the prepared could pass. You can imagine how it must have felt, lying in your tomb, knowing that beyond the carved walls and painted ceilings, a voyage awaited. You would rise, not with your body, but with your ka, your vital essence, and you would step into a river darker than night. There, you would see the ferryman, stern and silent, waiting for his oar. He would not row unless you knew his name. Speak it wrong, and the current would sweep you away. Speak it true, and the boat would carry you to the next gate, the next chamber, the next trial. And so, the duet was not just a map of the afterlife, but a mirror of life itself. To know the river was to know that every word mattered, every action weighed, every truth spoken remembered. The guardians at the gates were not strangers. They were the faces of justice, of memory, of balance. To pass them was to prove that your life had been lived in harmony with Ma'at. The Egyptians painted this map on the walls of tombs, inscribed it on coffins, copied it into the Duat in the Book of Gates, not as decorations, but as guidebook, a lantern lit in words. Each passage told the souls where to go, what to say, how to act. The afterlife was not left to chance. It was prepared for as carefully as a caravan prepares for a desert crossing. Without the map, you wandered forever. With it, you had a chance, slim but real. And yet, even with the map, the traveler could not set out unready, for the Dua demanded more than knowledge of its gates. It demanded a body prepared, a vessel fit to carry the soul, wrapped and guarded and filled with the tools of the journey. And so, before the first step on that night river, came the long work of embalming, amulets, and the gathering of goods for the road. That is where our journey turns next. The Duat was not walked in spirit alone. To the Egyptians, the soul needs its vessel, a body carefully tended, preserved, and clothed with the tools of eternity. Death was never sudden in their imagination. It was a transition, one that demanded preparation as exacting as any coronation. To enter the afterlife without this work was like stepping into the desert without water, or boarding a ship without sails. The journey would end before it began. So the body was prepared with reverence. In chambers heavy with resin and incense, where embalmers moved with the solemnity of priests, they were not simply craftsmen, but caretakers of eternity, trained to perform each act with precision. They worked slowly, methodically, wrapping the body not in haste, but in rhythm, as though each fold of linen was a prayer made tangible. Linen itself was sacred. It was spun from flax grown in the wet soil of the Nile, harvested at dawn, woven in patterns known for centuries. The fabric was light and strong, able to endure not just years but millennia. Each strip was washed, blessed, and cut into measured lengths. Wrapping the body was not merely protection against decay, it was an act of transformation, turning fragile flesh into a figure ready to rise again. The more carefully the layers were bound, the more honored the dead would be in the eyes of the gods. Between the layers came amulets, each chosen with care. A heart scarab carved of stone, placed near the chest, to silence the heart if it tried to testify falsely during judgment. The eye of the Horus to heal and protect. The ankh, symbol of life, tucked against the limbs. These were not ornaments, but keys, each amulet a safeguard against the dangers of the Duat, each one carrying words of power etched into its surface. Some were shaped like jet pillars, promising stability, others like Shen rings, encircling the soul in divine protection. The embalmers knew where each belonged, as surely as a navigator knows where to place the stars. Over the mouth, They sometimes placed a small charm, for the dead would need to speak the words of the Book of the Dead. Without a voice, the soul could not answer the guardians at the gates. Over the feet, they sometimes placed sandals, for even in the fields of reeds, one needed to walk. Miniature boats, carved of wood, were placed nearby, in case the rivers of the afterlife required crossing. Shapty figurines, little servants of clay or stone, were arranged in boxes, ready to spring to life and work the fields in paradise so the soul might rest. And always, there were offerings of food and drink, loaves of bread, jars of beer, dates, onions, honey. For the journey was long, and the body, though silent, was still a vessel that required sustenance. These goods were not meant to rot in the tomb. They were transformed by ritual into eternal provision, food for the ka, the life force that lingered beyond the flesh. Families played their role too. Relatives stood by, mourning not as despair but as duty. Their laments were part of the ritual, their tears offerings as real as oil or cloth. Sons and daughters poured libations, whispering the name of the deceased so that it would not fade. For to the Egyptians, memory itself was a form of survival. A man forgotten was a man truly dead. To speak his name was to keep him alive in the halls of Osiris. The walls of the tomb were prepared as carefully as the body. Painted scenes showed the dead hunting, fishing, feasting, walking with loved ones. These were not idle decorations. They were blueprints, promises made solid. To show a man with bread was to ensure bread for him in eternity. To carve him steering a boat was to ensure he would never lack a vessel in the Duat. Tombs were built not as monuments for the living, but as workshops for the afterlife, stocked with everything a soul might need. The Book of the Dead was often placed within the wrappings or nearby the tomb, not a single book, but a collection of spells written on papyrus, copied and recopied through generations. Each spell was a light in darkness, an instruction for overcoming obstacles. One told the soul how to pass the serpent that coiled in the underworld river. Another taught how to avoid losing one's heart to the devourer. Another gave the words to say when confronted by a guardian at the gate. The book was a lantern of ink, carried into a land where no other light could follow. All of this was preparation, but it was also belief made tangible. To wrap a body was to affirm that life continued. To place an amulet was to declare trust in the gods. To bury bread and beer was to state plainly, the dead will eat, the dead will drink, the dead will live again. Nothing was left to chance. You can imagine the final moment when the family and priest stood together, the body wrapped, the tomb sealed, the incense fading into night. The air would have been heavy with grief, but also with ceremony, for they knew this was only the beginning. The real journey was ahead, and the body, silent and still, was ready to walk it. But the body alone was not enough. The duat demanded more than linen and charms. It demanded truth itself, spoken aloud, confessed before 42 divine judges. And so, as the travelers set forth, their next trial was not physical but moral. The 42 negative confessions, a litany of honesty that revealed whether a heart was light enough to move forward.